Hello and welcome to the Human Echoes podcast, the show where we discuss oddball movies, have oddball discussions, and occasionally take questions from you, the oddball fans.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and we are joined by a man known simply as Waffles tonight.
Or Evil Waffles, depending.
This is his nom de plume on the internet. There's probably a real name behind there somewhere. He's big on Twitch, big on Twitter, bigger than us anyway. And he has invited us around, or we've invited him. I don't know how this worked, Tony. Tony was the one who wrangled
basically
this.
we all talked back in
Tony.
the day. We all talked back in the day because he was a fan of the show. I had checked out his streams a couple times, and we were going back and forth. And I believe the exact words were, "Dude, we need to watch Dune sometime." And that pretty much started us down this path. It actually took a little bit to get to this point.
Did we really need to watch Dune?
I know. Just watching this, that this was going to be too weird for you, Al.
It wasn't too weird.
Almost a little too weird for me.
Wait, we should let Waffles get a word in edgeways, by the way. Hi, man. How are you doing?
Howdy. How you guys doing? Yeah.
Like, you got those golden pipes, and we haven't let you say one word yet.
Hey, I was waiting. Y'all were doing your thing, and I know exactly what that's all about. So I was just sitting back waiting for my cue to come in. So apparently I've chimed in. Name's Garrett, by the way. You guys call me G. It's fine. Waffles, G, anything really.
I'm gonna sticking with the waffle shtick, okay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything on your channel is about waffles. You can gamble waffles to win things. It's fun.
It doesn't just stop there. Syrup, anything you can imagine.
So, Dune, the problem is not that it's weird. The weird is the good part. The problem is that it's slow.
Yeah, there's definitely some slowness to it.
Slow. And I got, right before we started recording, I found out that there was a version that was not 2 hours and 45 minutes long that I could have been watching this whole time. What was up with that, Tony? Thanks for warning me. Thanks for the heads up.
He's setting you up for
I
failure,
thought I already
man.
told you about that. We have a lack of communication, Al and I.
I went on Amazon. I was like, all right, search for Dune. There's Dune. All right. That's, I rented the SD version for $3, in their 24-hour thing. I'm going to sit down and watch this. And it was a whole 24 hours. It felt like I was sat there. It almost timed me out watching one show. Sheesh.
Yeah, the cool thing is that there's multiple versions of the first one, because Frank Herbert had his son, who also wrote stuff in the later years. He also rewrote the first one, and not too many people were happy about it because it was a really dumbing down version. It was basically for us, first time Dune visitors. We listen to something and read something. It was just an easy read. And that's what Frank Herbert's son did for us. But, a lot of fans weren't too happy about that, mostly because of the slowness.
Are you a fan of the novel, the original novel? Because I've heard of it many times, but I've never taken the plunge into anything in that universe.
Yes and no. Originally, I didn't even know I was reading the newer version of it because my dad is a humongous Dune fan. But when I was reading, when I started reading the first book, I was reading the one that his son wrote. And
does it have a different name, or do they just still leave it called Dune and let you figure it out on your own?
No, it's the same thing. It's just 200 pages less almost. And
he wrote completely from scratch, or is it edited, or? I mean,
it's heavily edited, yeah, because
okay, so he didn't sit down and be like, well, Dad told this story and I'm gonna tell it completely again. He just cut a bunch of stuff out.
Well, he did it for two reasons. Because after the series was over, when his dad died, he continued the series, so he felt like for new readers, he wanted to rewrite it, but also write it himself so he can get a better feel for it. Does that make sense? Because he was going to write the future.
That makes sense as an exercise. It doesn't make sense for something you're going to publish.
Oh, yeah.
If I went through and I was like, I'm going to rewrite Harry Potter, I wouldn't be like, and here's my version for sale at $19.99.
And that sounds like a lot of the problem with the new Harry Potter book that came out this week. I've heard a lot of nasty things about that.
Man,
I haven't read it yet, so I can't speak to the actual content. But I think there's a lot of people screaming about their ruined childhood, like that's the most important thing in the world. Their childhood. Get a life. about all of that. Whatever your thing is, it was your childhood.
So Frank Herbert's son and Kevin J. Anderson went on to write a bunch of different Dune novels. Like, there's quite a bit in this universe. Like, Frank Herbert only wrote 3 or 4? I can't remember.
But they were hefty in comparison to the other ones. Yeah. They were super long. And the good thing about Dune, what you said earlier, you know, it's super slow. But at the same time, it kind of has to be because it backtracks a lot. You know, it'll talk about how people left Earth like 20,000 years ago to spread stuff throughout the universe, you know, and it just has a ton of lore that you kind of need to catch up on because the book doesn't start at the beginning. It starts in the middle, in a sense, because it starts out with all these names that you don't know, you know, like it starts out with the Moadibs, and they just kind of put a lot of stuff right there on your plate and you have no idea what they are. So you kind of have to backtrack and catch up, and then the story gets better and better from there, in my opinion.
Lynch also had to do a little bit of that with like giant exposition things in this movie. Like the movie starts with about a 3-minute monologue about that.
Everybody's always saying what they're thinking all the time in every scene. They're either just saying out loud what they're thinking, or he like gets a close up of their face and gives us like their inner monologue.
Mm-hmm.
I
didn't.
Was not a fan of that. If you can't tell.
I didn't watch the miniseries for this either. Have you watched that one? Like the one that came out in 2000?
I watched it barely, but once it started getting further and further into the plot, it kind of went off track of the books, and they kind of dramatized everything. And at that point, I just kind of lost it. I didn't really care anymore, and I was like a teenager then anyway, so I just kind of went off and did my own thing.
There's no energy to me in almost anything here. I mean, David Lynch apparently never met a tripod he doesn't like, because every shot in this is locked down or like very minimal movements. And I mean, that is fine to a point, but when everything just feels so stale in this, there's no energy, there's no fun. You know, you get to...
It has its moments. There's some, like, a lot of them are buried under weirdness, but, like, I thought that just the weird little side character things were hilarious. Like, whenever the doctor's whispering into the pustule-faced guy's ears, like the Baron?
Mm-hmm.
Just weirdness like that is just so much, like, there's a little bit of just off-the-wall Lynch flavor to this movie, and I know a lot of that stuff isn't in the books. But, I didn't hate it as much as Al did. I didn't hate it in general. I just thought it was really, really odd.
Oh, it's extremely different.
I don't know if I hated it. I just was bored, and that disappointed me, because on the flip side of the things that I like, the design of everything and the special effects are really great for the time.
Yeah, it's 1984, so they did a pretty good job with all that.
I mean, they're coming out right around the same time as Return of the Jedi, so it doesn't quite hold up to that standard. But even so, the design of all these sets, I mean, it just looks... You can see the money in this movie. You just look at it and you're like, oh, that cost so much. I can tell somebody like sat there and produced every bit of that set. It just
And some of the weird
hurts.
creature effects, like the navigators, were really cool looking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, except when they made him glow. Like, that dude looks awesome when they brought him in his giant tank, and I was like, oh, that's a great effect. And then later on, he's got this odd, like, overlit sort of superimposition thing going on that, I mean, I understand that they're kind of going into another universe type thing, which that's something that I imagine was explained better in the books. They just sort of allude to, the spice is kind of magically connected to the worms, and also... it folds time, and also you get high off of it.
That is
lots
true.
Of stuff.
And like superpowers, evidently. Well, like, here's the thing is, you know, speaking of sets and movies, Frank Herbert, I think, was really talented in how he made imagery. For instance, the spice or melange or melag, or however people say it. You know, there's like 50 different ways people say it. But he does this really cool thing with imagery to where if you're reading the book, you can imagine it any way you want but it doesn't matter how you're imagining it as long as you're putting it into context, and the story is really what carries your thought. So, for instance, in the movie and sometimes the show, and you'll see in pictures, the spice will be like all different colors, all sort of like different textures, and these directors and actors kind of visualize what the spice looks like, because it's, you know, it's not just a spice, but like ships run off of it. And all these like people just really, really want it. And I think what Herbert did was a really cool way for you to just kind of imagine however you want it to be. And that's the way it was, as long as you kept it in context, because it still made the story awesome. You see what I'm saying?
So, and I could see why that would attract some of the directors it did, because David Lynch has always been so heavily visual, and Jodorowsky wanted his shot at it, and he's probably one of the more interesting directors I've ever seen as far as use of color and sets and everything.
And as weird as Jodorowsky, or I think it's Hodorowski, could be, like, I think he would have given it more dynamic, more forward momentum than Lynch managed to in the movie. I do think you brought up the fact that the ships run on the spice, but it's not like they're throwing that into the engines, right? And this is one of the interesting things that I'm just now thinking about this universe, as it's shown in the books, or in the movie, I'm sorry, is that this is a universe that runs on people power.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not humans, but I mean, the ships are propelled by these organisms that eat the spice and then are able to tap into, you know, this space warping weirdness.
Exactly.
And they have these computers named the Mentats,
Mm-hmm.
who calculate everything. And there are machines, sort of, but it's like we've kind of, I mean, it's an odd future. Obviously, you know, science fiction isn't really meant to predict the future. It's sort of a weird, you know, it's a reflection of us and our ideas, but it's not a future where technology has taken over. Technology is almost like we have become technology.
In a lot of ways, you're definitely right. Like, even their weapons are based off of like our voice and psychic power rather than just like physical bullets and everything. And you've got the Mentats who are taking like some crazy juice to get all hyped up so that they can think logically and make all these plans and get like
Right.
There's a lot of people just getting high for the sake of the crew in this movie.
Well, it's very interesting because now, like I said before, that kind of context or concept, goes into some lore, because you know, there's two houses. You know, there was two main houses, Atreides and the Harkonnen, and you still have this king pretty much in between them. And a long time ago, that king pretty much banned anybody from making a artificial intelligence. So what did humans do? They did what they did best and found a loophole. So they made machines that like kind of made humans, but they were like perfect humans. And then came the Bene Gesserits, which is like a world of, I like to see them as a world of witches, really, because they're all women, you know, and
right.
they can control.
Those
like,
were the bald nuns, right?
Yeah, they can like control the gender of their babies, and you know, I just kind of see them as this huge, you know, community of witches, you know. But you know, it's interesting because now Herbert has set something in the storyline that you now have to think about. Like, okay, these aren't machines, and it's not going to be people like shooting at each other fighting, and it's not going to be people like stabbing each other fighting. It's going to be this weird like mental fight between the two houses, and then you get into Paul, and you know, we'll dive into that later because that's another story within itself. But you know, now you have to really, really think and capture about these two heads of each house and how they're gonna play into the storyline.
Do you think the movie works better if you've read the book? Or, I mean, is the movie something that rides off of what's in the book, and you sort of feel like, oh man, yeah, I always wanted to see, because the worms, I gotta admit, like, despite it being really slow, he visualizes those worms pretty cool. I can't imagine much I mean, other than sort of better compositing, but like giving them that scale. Is there value there, or is it something that just does it take away from the book? What's the relationship there between those two?
That's an interesting question. And as a fan who read the book first, I will always recommend reading the book first. And there's
Which one?
The very, very original Dune. Very, very original.
Okay.
The one that was written in 1965, I think. Don't quote me on that.
You can pick up a really cool version from Amazon with their like classic covers and everything of the original for like $15 right now, like the hardback with the gilded pages and all that.
Oh, nice. Wow. Okay, I got to jump on that because I got audiobooks
it
right
looks
now.
awesome.
But yeah, I highly recommend reading the book and then watching the movie because there's just so much in the book that you need to think and feel about and kind of understand the atmosphere that the movies can't simply put without being, 4 or 5 hours long. But in terms of the worms, like the scale of the worms are definitely a huge factor because Paul uses them later. What are they called? Fremen? The Fremen, who control the worms.
The blue-eyed people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He uses them later to basically take his house back, which was taken from him by the Baron. And you have to understand the amazing size of the worms and how he uses them to fight and get his house back. So
that was definitely one of the most impressive scenes whenever they're near that the Spice Miner and Max von Sydow's in the ship with them. And you just see the worm completely encompassing this thing. Because I knew they were big from where it was moving around and I'd heard that they were big, but that thing just entirely swallowed it. It was way bigger than I expected it to be, and it looked great, especially in that particular scene.
Oh yeah. So yeah, you definitely have to understand the major importance of the worms. Because at the very beginning of the book, they just kind of throw it in like it's a thing, that's just, we have birds on Earth and they have worms on Dune. And they just kind of, Arrakis, that's the word I was thinking of. And they just kind of throw it in there for you to just kind of think about. And then later on, you're like, oh, these things are like, horses on steroids, except they fight back.
Well, horses can fight back too. You don't want to get in a fight with a horse. I don't want to get in a fight with a horse.
It reminds me about the time my dad punched a cow, knocked it over, just because it hit a nerve. It gave him all this confidence. So he thought he could push a bull, and that didn't work out for him. That's a longer story about mishaps and teenagers fighting bulls. But
having not read the book, I still have to say, I think there's a version of the story in the movie that could work pretty well if they could just pep it up a little bit more. I mean, everybody is giving this either weird over-the-top, giggling thing or just the most stone-faced performance imaginable. The actor who plays Paul, whose name I'm blanking on.
McLaughlin.
Yeah, probably McLaughlin.
Yeah.
He also shows up in Twin Peaks later on, so Lynch obviously likes him, but he's not very dynamic. And about the only person who's really compelling in this is the guy who he fights at the end, whose name I'm forgetting.
The Baron was pretty dynamic as far as being very exciting, and then you've got him fighting Sting, which is trying to remember Fade or something like that is the character's name.
Oh, Fade Alpha.
Yeah,
his nephew, the Baron's nephew,
who he also really seems to be into.
Yeah,
this movie is a little bit homophobic.
So what do you mean by pep up? They should pep up the movie. What do you mean by that?
I mean, you could have the pacing of the scenes could be better. You could change some of the exposition. You don't have to have everybody have a voiceover. You could move the camera every once in a while. You could get more dynamic performances out of these actors. There's 20 things that you could do to speed it along. I mean, it doesn't need to be exactly Star Wars, but it could be less sedate. That doesn't need what the story they're telling here doesn't need this the running time. And again, I guess I watched the extended cut.
Yeah, you
And I was
watched the
wondering
extra half hour of stuff in there.
why they kept cutting like it was a commercial. Like every once in a while there'd just be like a cut to black and then it would come back and I was like, what is this weird TV edit that I'm seeing? Like they're going to commercial. Now I realized that was the TV version and they put extra stuff in there. But I just think that there is a way to even use it use the same sets, use a lot of the same special effects, but it feels like it's just stuck in a quagmire the whole movie. It's like dragging its way forward through molasses, trying to figure out how to get some forward plot movement, and there's never I was never like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen now? It was always inevitable that, except for the guy even says, he wakes up the moment when the Baron wakes up and he's like, he has the gas thing in his tooth. He's like, what should I do? What did he say? It's like, we just saw him say it. You don't have to have him have that conversation with himself out loud. You act, get the guy to act.
It was also lacking in a few moments where he just all of a sudden sees his wife or his girl, Chada or whatever her name is, and they're just perfectly fine. And then they've got the weird 70s 80s style they're half transparent making out for a while during an expository scene. And
yeah, wow, wasn't that a dynamic romance? I was it's a sarcasm.
So I can definitely see where you're coming from. I think that you would have just benefited so much by that half hour less.
I just think it could have used a few more drops of Star Wars type editing. That's all it doesn't need to be Star Wars, but it feels, sort of, I imagine probably that George Lucas read some of this stuff. He ripped off everything that he could when he was writing Star Wars and to, not a problem with that. He used all of the influences he could find and everything that he thought was cool and sort of mashed it all together. But I guarantee you the people who were making this wanted it to be the next Star Wars. David Lynch was not the guy to make that the next Star Wars by any stretch. And boy, am I glad he did not get his grubby mitts on, Return of the Jedi. What a weird movie that would have been.
I'm just going through the possibilities of what that would have been. That's a fascinating idea. That almost happened, didn't it?
It did. That he turned down Return of the Jedi to do Dune.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That I did not know. That is interesting. Maybe he's just that loyal to the brand.
Well, I think he was interested in the book, although speaking of, behind the scenes stuff, he kind of disowns this movie. As he was making it, he ended up with a 3-hour cut and the producers locked him out of the editing room. They're like, no, we're not doing a 3-hour movie. Okay. We're cutting it down some. And it wasn't what he wanted it to be. So some of the stuff, I think a lot of the voiceover is not his fault. Mm-hmm. I think they were worried that people were going to be confused. And so they're like, we'll slap voiceover over everything. That'll make it better. It didn't make it better. I don't know that it made it worse either. I'm trying to imagine watching this movie without the voiceover and it would just be slightly less annoying, but it still would have had the same kind of plodding along pace.
Well, I agree with you and then I disagree with you on two fronts because movie-wise, yes, I agree. Things need to be a lot faster, a lot shinier, and a lot more to the point. But if you go back and read the books, that's almost the exact opposite way that Herbert wrote the book. Because if you look at Star Wars, it's a one and done. You have a mission, they do it, you're done, move on to the next thing or the next problem or the next romance scene or whatever. But Frank Herbert does this thing to where he likes to tell you what the character's thinking about mentally, how he feels physically and how he feels emotionally. What his best options are. He likes to go through the mental, steps of what that character's going to do, both before and after the scene. So, at the very, very beginning of the book, Paul comes in and then he has his test or whatever. He describes almost every single detail that Paul is going through. both mentally and, he also talks to the Bene Gesserit chick, the what I like to call the witch, because I imagine her this evil, bright green.
They call them witches at some point, don't they? In the movie, they do anyway.
Oh well, they do, but it's kind of a
witches
slang
with silver
thing.
grills.
Yeah, but that
you're talking about the scene where he puts his hand in the box, right?
Yes, because in the books, it's oh my gosh, it's like 50 pages long, just that one scene, and you're going through every single emotion and feeling with Paul. And that's what Herbert likes to do. And that's why the movies feel so slow, because they don't want to really take away from his writing. But if you're going to make a movie, you kind of need to, because you're going to start losing the interest of people.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's nothing against that in the book, but you're absolutely right. The movie needs to move faster. I mean, I really love the Honor Harrington series, but if I was ever, asked to adapt that, I would not have, 6 hours of everybody talking and explaining exactly all of the politics in the galaxy, because I mean, he loves to paint those intricate pictures of everything that's going on, and that's great for the books. Yeah, well, even for the books, sometimes it slows you down a little bit, but as if you're gonna adapt, you need to adapt. You can't always capture exactly what is in a book, because it's different. But I'm sorry I can't speak to some of the stuff that you're saying, because I haven't read it. Read the books. I'm only speaking to the the movie, but it feels like that there is a really interesting story here. You have these two houses that are feuding. You have this sort of old universe that's set in its ways, and and there's this one sort of backwater planet that is somehow, it's driving everything, and that, it turns out that they have more power than they expect. I do take some issue with how, I don't know, how pat the sort of hero's journey is. Like this, why is this guy so special other than just a prophecy? He just shows up and he's like, yep, I've got all this. I mean, they show him, they do a good job of showing that he has the talents and everything, but it feels very condescending almost to all these to these people who have spent all this time in hiding and saving up these water supplies and clearly preparing themselves. And this guy kind of shows up on the scene. He's like, all right, I'm the guy you've been waiting for.
Yeah.
I would have rather see it as this is playing out. It would be cool to me. It would be more compelling if he wasn't somebody of royal birth. If he was, a commoner, or at least didn't know that he was of royal birth. I guess it's neat that he ends up losing everything. But in the movie, that kind of just, even in the longer version, that gets a little bit glossed over. It's like, oh well, bad stuff happened. Anyway, he's fighting now.
Yeah, I agree, but that's where the lore thing comes in. He does. In the movies, just kind of show up, and you're like, "Hey, look at me! I'm the hero. I'm the good guy." But in the books and the ones before it, who would talk about the lore, because Jessica hates the Bene Gesserits, and Jessica promised them a girl, but she had a son instead, and that was Paul. And basically, it's hard. Oh man, it's really hard to explain. So basically, she was trying to hide him for a really long time, and then when the Bene Gesserits, they found out that she had a son instead, they were super duper mad. So the Bene Gesserits then went to the Baron, and then the Baron eventually killed the king because of that one guy who was in his house forever and basically betrayed him. But Paul was kind of like this hidden idol that Jessica was holding on to for quite a while.
So kind of like royal exile type thing.
Exactly. But they don't really explain that in the books. And that's a really big key factor, because it's kind of like he had to kind of sneak him almost like Frodo tried to sneak the ring into Mordor. That's where all the bad guys are. That's basically what Jessica had to do with Paul to sneak him in to do the test.
And it also didn't bother me that he wasn't a commoner, because they were showing the differences between the Harkonnen house and the Atreides house. There's actually nobility there. like as much as the father wants to keep his anonymity, he's still sacrificing all of that just so that he can save a few miners on a ship. Like he's doing a lot of things like showing that they are like definitively the good family there, and they're trying to live up to a higher standards than the Harkonnens. So I feel like with the way storytelling would work and like with having the resources that these families would have, it makes a little bit more sense to have that.
Mm-hmm. And that definitely, I think this is more coming out of like, because I felt a little bit bored by the movie, I get kind of nitpicky. If it had been a little bit more compelling to me, I think I would have been, I mean, I might have still raised that issue, but I would have been like, yeah, but I'm fine with it. But because I was somewhat bored, I start thinking like, okay, well, I kind of there's the concept of these planets, and again, this lesser planet, right? Like there's this weird dichotomy where Dune is not anywhere that anybody wants to live. It's not.
Yeah, there's not a drop of rain. There's nothing there. It's just sand, worms, and the most important thing in the universe.
Yeah, it's a garbage planet, except for that it's also the most valuable planet. And that dichotomy is really interesting. And it would have been like thinking about sort of the value of what I guess you would say the lower class to the upper class. And, if we're going to spin that out as a kind of allegory, it would have been a better allegory if you're thinking of it in that sense, to have somebody from that class sort of break that system rather than having the upper class be like, oh, we will fix this for you poor people.
I was also going to say, like, as far as a movie like this goes, Lynch is not an action director. Like, whenever you're watching, like, the fight scenes, when you're watching all of that, it's just like, so it's not the greatest performance I've ever seen for a knife fight on film. Like, so I feel like that there's a lot of people aren't going to like the idea, but it seems like there could be a really good quality remake out of this movie if they took the time and they got the right people for it.
I haven't seen it, but I've read good things about the sci-fi Frank Herbert's Dune. But it seems like one of those things that's kind of in people's mind. I mean, it was fairly recently they had the Jodorowsky's Dune documentary. And this movie kind of keeps coming up as a sort of cult classic. I think that eventually that will happen.
You're talking about like popularity wise, like it will hit the majority of people and they're going to love it.
No, I think we're talking about a remake eventually.
Oh, the remake.
I think that eventually we will get I'm not saying in the next 5 years or even the next 10 years, but I think that there is enough interest behind this name that somebody will want to come back to it. Like, it's sort of like Flash Gordon, right? Flash Gordon has been out there. There was the 1970s version that's kind of has a similar reputation, right? Like, and I haven't seen that one, but I've heard, it's okay and it's got some really great music, but there are enough people who think like, oh, this is amazing, that they are working really hard on getting a new Flash Gordon made. Anyway, I think that the same thing will happen for Dune. My final criticism of the movie is sort of like, what the heck with the really blatant sexism? With like, I went where women cannot go. I understand like lore and everything, but wow, that felt a little bit out of time.
Yeah,
that might be a little bit of 1965 showing through.
Yeah. I have two like personal theories. They're not necessarily right, but my dad has my dad explained this to me. And the Baron, imagine these giant ships, right? And you're just like flying out in space. Frank Herbert really does this thing to where he jumps from one thing to another and kind of leaves this void of opinion in between. He doesn't really explain what happened or what's going on or how they got there. He just sometimes does that, with no warning, little to no warning. And, you're out there floating in the mass nothingness of space. Pretty much the only important thing to being around is Dune. So on the ships, there's no lady friends. The Bene Gesserits are like the only lady friends pretty much anywhere, except for on Arrakis, which are, the really, really poor, God, what are they called?
Fremen or whatever.
Yeah.
Fremen?
Freeman people? Fremen.
Yeah,
Fremen.
I'm guessing it was off of Freeman, but it was the Fremen.
Right. And that's pretty much it. And House Atreides pretty much has the only other girl that people know of, and everything else in between, they're either Mentats or they're just nowhere else to be found. So, I mean, what else is the Baron to like? You know, like what else is around for him to like if he knows no different?
I've also been kind of wondering what the Mentats were like in the book as opposed to the movie.
Oh, they're super annoying.
Are they?
Well, they nailed that in the movie then.
Imagine
with their crazy eyebrows and everything.
Yeah, imagine the Vulcans meeting humans, and then the Vulcans also being on steroids in terms of logicalness.
Yep, that works. That's
Their
a word
logical
now.
abilities.
Yes.
Call the Oxford English Dictionary, people.
So they're super annoying, and they're very upfront about them like possibly betraying you because you're an idiot. Does that make sense? Like Baron has Piter, and you know, Piter is always talking to the Baron, you know, about revenge and taking over Arrakis from the Atreides and how it's going to be super sweet and nice. And then the Baron's like, man, you are absolutely in love with revenge. And he goes, no, I'm in love with winning. And, you know, you're too stupid to win on your own. That's why you need me, Piter, the Mentat here. And then the Baron really doesn't like him, but he needs him, you know, in order to win the war or the battles, I guess. And that's the thing.
Why haven't the Mentats taken over, by the way? If they are that sort of ruthless and
they need
blunt.
humans to make more of them. So if they take over the humans,
so they can't breed.
Yeah, exactly.
I got you.
So it's kind of this 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of thing. Like we need them, but
Just
we
give it
hate
time.
that we need them.
Sounds like that they like it. It's a mutual hatred there.
And they're
Could the
not
Baron
smart enough
fly
to
in the
figure out
books?
they're not smart enough to figure out their own way to like reproduce, like to make more of the machines that make them or whatever.
Yeah, because in order for them to reproduce, since they're technically, you know, they're organic, but they're technically computers. They're just organic computers. So in order for them to recreate themselves, they have to create an AI, which is illegal. You can't make any sort of AI sequencing, and because that's what the king said.
Since we're talking about the stuff that the book goes into, does the book talk about where those weird alien pilot things come from? Are they aliens or have they been engineered somehow?
The only sentient life in Dune is pretty much human. Those are people that have been like on spice way too long, or at least that's what I was reading before this.
Yeah, that is correct. They're not really human, but they're not like aliens because we technically made them, if that makes sense. But they're
What are they called? The navigators?
Yeah, because everything is like organically propelled, and nothing is you know, quote unquote computer, as in, you know, algorithms and processing and stuff like that. It's all organic. It all has to be organic based. And the reason why, you'll have to go way back, and that's like another podcast. But basically the king says, no AIs ever, nothing. And then, you know,
Sounds like Elon Musk.
and then with Paul, you know, him being the amazing person that he is, and then he drank the what is it? The infinity water? I forgot the name of the water. But basically after he drank the water, you know, he could see the past, present, and future. You know, as soon as he woke up from that ridiculously awesome nap that I would always love to take, he woke up and he was like, whoa, this is crazy. I can see the past, present, and future. And that's how he took over his house back. And he noticed that it's not the big universe that you can't control. It's the infinite universe you can't control, because you can't control anything infinitely or indefinitely. So that kind of plays into the reason why they don't use computers, because you use computers selfishly. It's really hard to explain without another podcast, but if we were to use computers, then humans would eventually be obsolete, right? We would be like the Baron. We would be fat We would just lay around. Computers would do everything for us.
It's
I'm
like
already there.
a mix between Wall-E and this movie.
Exactly. Oh, that's perfect. Yes, exactly. That was dead accurate. That was good.
I'm working on it.
I feel like there's a big question. Hit me. Come on.
I was actually going to ask Tony if we got any questions from the listeners on Twitters.
We didn't. We asked too late in the evening. Everybody was already off work.
Oh.
Yeah.
To cut that out now.
Usually we get about 4. We're at 40 minutes, which is longer than we've done for most reviews we've ever done. So we've got a lot of other stuff we could talk about.
I was going to say, what else did you want to, what do we want to get into? Because I did not make notes for this one. I'm just coasting on Evil Waffles here and his wonderful golden pipes.
Ooh, thank you. Well,
you're welcome. I was telling him this the other day. It's not fair that he has that voice and that he's also 6'8".
I think probably being 6'8" helps with that. Although I'm 6'4" and I sound like this, so I mean it's not always.
I'm 6'9".
Yeah, Al's like 6 inches taller than me, and like I'm the one with the deep voice.
Life is just unfair.
I'm just excitable.
Man, I could talk for days about Dune. I love it that much. I'm not as big as a Dune fan as I am a comic book fan, but Dune is comic books are always on my mind, and Dune is always in my heart. So, since
you are a comic book fan, is there any comic book movies coming up that you are psyched for? Are you pumped up for Suicide Squad, which will be out when this podcast releases?
Ooh. Yes, I am excited for Suicide Squad, but I am not as excited as Black Panther's movie or the third Thor. Everybody hates the individual Thors, but I love them. I really
I never had a problem with them.
I felt like the first one was a little bit. I didn't like the first one as much. I thought, but I don't hate it.
I felt like the bad guy in the first one, not Loki, like the big metal thing, was a little bit too easy to destroy and all that. Like there were some small problems with the movie, but as far as the character goes, I had a lot of fun with it. I'm looking forward to Ragnarok. I'm really excited about it.
Oh yeah.
I think the thing in that first Thor movie is you really have to buy into him laying there. Like you have to buy into the idea that he might not get his power back, right? And that, I mean, logically, how the stories work. You know that he is, but you have to be able to be brought to that point by the movie that, oh man, maybe he's not, maybe he doesn't get Mjolnir back. And I never got there. I was like, when I watched the movie, I just sat there thinking, yep, all right, come on, get it over with. I know he's gonna come flying to you and you're gonna smash it. Come on. But there are other people, maybe you guys are some of them who like you can get into that scene and really like, oh, even if you've already seen it, it really works for you. And that's a very subjective thing. But I don't think it's a bad movie. By any stretch. And I liked the second one until, again, these Thor movies, I think, falter, right at the end. Everything with Jane Foster in that second movie.
Agreed. It's annoying.
In the finale, I liked the lead up with her. I liked her investigating and sort of figuring stuff out. That was fine. But then when she's, running around putting those stakes down, I was just like, no, you're not. This is not helpful.
I find it interesting the different approach that DC is taking right now, where they're actually putting in a bunch of villains that you're going to feel for, like you're actually going to have an emotional connection to, because that's always been kind of Marvel's thing. The only really big villain that they have that people know about and care about is Loki. And now you're going to have, you're building up the Joker, you're building up Deadshot, you're building up Harley Quinn, all these other ones coming up and doing the Suicide Squad movie before you've really established a ton in your world, and people are already trying to forget about BVS. So you're going to end up having people like your villains more than you like the heroes, and I think that might end up working well for them.
I think that I don't think the Joker is going to be sympathetic. Okay, if he is, that's a bad call. The Joker is not a sympathetic character. Don't make the Joker sympathetic. But I mean, you are right. If they do this Joker well, he can be a real strong villain. He's not going to get killed off here. I would take all kinds of money betting that he's not going to get killed off in this movie. And so they can sort of fill that villain gap, but it sort of raises the question, is that something that we need? People keep criticizing Marvel for having kind of forgettable villains, but their movies keep being pretty great. And
well, I'm just saying there's a better use for Crossbones than the first 15 minutes of Civil War. Like, there's a better use for a lot of these people, and I think whenever you set up a movie like this and you actually understand the villains, it's going to feed into the other movies a lot later. And we didn't really ask you if you were mostly about, like, DC or if you were about, like, Marvel, or if you're even into, like, Image or any of the other major comic book companies. What are some of your favorite comics, Waffles?
Oh, man. I am glad you said that. Shazam, for some reason, is, like, one of my favorite characters on the DC universe. But one of my favorite characters of all time is Captain America. I know that's a very, like, stereotypical thing to do. But there's a lot of reasons why, because Captain America has fantastic morals. And as me being a dad of 3 children, you know, he's good to say something like, you know, because my child loves Captain America and Marvel in general, you know, I would say, you know, does Captain America appreciate that? Or, you know, and be completely legitimate. People can think you're funny, but, you know, at the same time, he doesn't kill people. He believes in freedom. You know, he believes in fighting for what you believe in. You know, he's just all around like a good
There's
moral,
an actual principled belief there behind everything that he does.
Exactly. And his super soldier comic books are absolutely amazing. And him in Civil War is absolutely amazing. I just love all Captain America books, really. Really the one where it's him versus Hydra are probably the best that I've ever read.
Well, the thing about Captain America is he's an idealist, right? Like, he's the kind of guy who, if he believed in to take it to in a weird election place, if he believed that the third party candidate that had no chance of winning was the best person to lead, he would vote for that person. Like, there's not an ounce of pragmatism in his body, and there's something really endearing about that, because ultimately, as you know, sort of in the quote unquote a grown-up adult world, a lot of us end up having to make the pragmatic choice, and a lot of comics have gone that way too, where they'll, you know, they want to have the grittier heroes. They want to, you know, force them. What happens if you can't make the right choice? But it is nice to have a character that is about doing right. Like, it's just for the sake of, it's not like, oh, my parents died, or, you know, oh, people got, it's like, his thing is like, from the get-go is, I want to help. I want to serve. And that's why that I think is my favorite early. I mean, Iron Man is really difficult to beat, but I really enjoy that first Captain America movie because it sets him out, and people, I don't know why people don't like the sort of early stuff with him, but
that was one of the better Marvel movies, like, just overall. It's got to be top 3 for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, it's subjective there, and it's fine if you don't feel that way, but to me, that I identify with that, and maybe not even identify, but appreciate the idea that there's just a guy who wants to help, you know. It's not tragic, it's not like tortured, he's just, I'm gonna do the right thing. And
kind of came from like a small man complex in the beginning of that movie, but still.
Well, I don't know if it was a complex. The small man was just there to provide a block for him. You know, if he had been big and strong to begin with, he could have just enlisted like he wanted to. I don't think that would have changed if he had been a bigger guy. It wouldn't have changed his character initially. It just would have taken him on a different path.
Yeah, it's like whenever they throw the grenade on the ground, they're looking for the guy who's willing to die for his friends for the experiment and everything.
Yeah.
They need that top tier person.
And also smart. You know, they show him doing the thing with the flagpole. Great.
Yeah.
I love that movie. But he is...
I'm sometimes guilty of being the guy that wants like grittier comics and everything, mostly because I hate the Superman, like full-on Boy Scout, unrealistic, overpowered type stuff. Mm. And I think the only one that I really give a pass to is Captain America.
I think Superman, that's what I think is honestly missing in the DC universe. Like, let Batman be the dark, gritty, tortured one, and let Superman be the guy who says, hey, we're just going to do what's right. I think that there's a good contrast to be had there. You can have both.
Yeah.
You don't. I think that you can have both of those things and have them both work. I don't know that they set it up that well. I thought there was a great opportunity in Man of Steel to really show Superman and explain like where his morals come from. And watching that movie just made me think more like, if I was Superman, I would totally not be that much of a Boy Scout. I have not been shown anything that makes me think that, other than just sort of like Mom and Pa Kent say, man, you better do the right thing. But if you have literal superpowers, you might not listen to your parents that much. They can't lock you in your room. They can't. Well, they can't tell you what to do. And especially when you become a dude.
The things he'd see with the X-ray vision too.
And exactly. So I was never completely convinced by Man of Steel, but I wanted to be. I wanted to believe in this guy who just did right because that's what he believed in.
Right.
And I want more of. I would like to see more of that from the DC films.
Well,
looks like the new Justice League is going to be a little less gloomy.
No, Superman's dead now, Tony.
Well,
that's a spoiler. I'm sorry. Everybody's seen BVS, right?
You know he's not. They already admitted he wasn't. Zack Snyder said he wasn't.
Oh yeah,
they put him in the poster. What a cop out! No, I was making a joke about.
Well, see, here's the thing about Superman. Like y'all are saying, like let Batman be the dark guy, and Superman's like let's do the right thing. If y'all, I highly recommend if you read The Bright Side of Clark Kent, the comic book series. You'll see why they kind of made him the way in the movies, and I totally agree with it. Because throughout the entire movie, they portrayed Superman fantastically. It's the people in the movie that made him kind of come out on the wrong way, right? So if you're watching the movie, you kind of understand, he's a little kid and he's growing up. You don't just see Superman as an adult, you see him growing up and you see that his father is the one kind of with the high morals, the guy, not really his father, but the guy who took him in, with the high morals and, you got to do what's right. I know you have the power to just, do basically whatever you want, but that's not right. And growing up, he slowly starts to understand that, but it's the people that are making him feel this way. He's still a good person and he still wants to do what's right. And they just like are kind of making him crazy because at the same time he wants to do what's right. And on the other side, he's like, I don't know why these people are doing this. This is really dumb. How's nobody seeing this, So,
well, you also see him lost for a little while, especially after his dad dies in the series, where he's just roaming around doing almost nothing for other people. Like occasionally he'll do something that's heroic, but he's just out there trying to find himself. Like there's just a lot of it's just, I don't know. I lost the thread on that, but I see where the morals could come from with that, and it's going to be interesting to see where they take it from here. I don't even know if they're going to give him another movie to himself. I'm sure he'll probably get one in a few years, but I haven't seen a full laid out plan like what Marvel has for the next few phases.
They've got a laid out plan, but they haven't announced anything for Superman yet. They have a big Batman film planned, but Superman is still... I kind of like the idea of him as not a bit player, but like as a supporting character in other movies, similar to how they're using him, Batman and Suicide Squad, where he's in the world, he's part of the world, but maybe the story doesn't revolve around him. I mean, I'm not saying never have another Superman movie, but I'm not itching for like, oh, we got to get more Superman. Let's see how he interacts with, the Flash and with the guy who's a robot, Cyborg.
Yeah.
My brain had to find the word.
I know one of the comics that Al's big on right now is Swamp Thing. Did you ever end up reading that?
No, but
I'm reading the Alan Moore run on Swamp Thing from like the late 80s, and it is amazing. I just got done with his I think anyway, it's his take on their like I guess they had a crisis type event, and Swamp Thing sort of has his own deal within that where I guess the people are attacking, but he's not really interested in the external world. He meets Constantine, who is introduced in this series, and Constantine says to him, hey, like everybody's out here battling and like having their big universe shifting thing, but there's another thing in the spiritual plane that's waiting to take advantage of that, and we got to go deal with that. And the way that all plays out is pretty amazing. They see the giant misshapen thing in the distance, and it's like a pillar, and then like the one guy it's just this huge pillar of blackness, and it keeps absorbing different heroes that go up against it to fight them, and he keeps asking him, what's the nature of evil? What is evil? What is the purpose of evil? And finally Swamp Thing's like, fine, I'll give it a go. After like basically a god level being has been absorbed and spit back out. It's like, you don't have what I want. And Swamp Thing walks in there and has a talk with this thing of blackness, and it's amazing. Alan Moore is, I have a lot of respect for that dude at this point. He goes some weird places, but he goes there with 100% sincerity.
Every time you describe this, I need to pick up, like, I think I just need to get that graphic novel run. Like, he was the only, so like, he's the only comic book author that made it into the 100 most influential books of the last century. Like, The Watchmen made it on that list because of how well he wrote it. So, definitely need to check it out.
And he, like, the great thing about the Swamp Thing is, right after, and I talk about, by the way, if you guys haven't heard, next week, I think, my interview with the Comic Noobs is going to go up, and I talked about this at length on their show. But Swamp Thing is that what he did directly after Watchmen. So you can imagine, like, he's riding a pretty big high. He could do almost whatever he wants to do, and he picks up this sort of weird D-list oddball character, the Swamp Thing, and says, I can do something with this. And boy, does he ever. Check it out. If you guys are on go check it out on Amazon. The Saga of the Swamp Thing is what his run is called. It's like 6 or 7 volumes. It's really great stuff.
Nice. All right, man. There's tons of stuff that I need to read now.
I'm not a big comic book reader. I am not like, I don't go down to my comic book shop. I'm not like picking through, but I do sort of file away the stuff that I hear people recommend frequently. I have that one in my head. I need to buy Squirrel Girl Volume 3 because that's the only current comic I'm keeping up with. I love me some Squirrel Girl. And I'm wanting to read Neil Gaiman's run on a comic called Miracle Man, which is sort of a deconstruction of Shazam. I actually wanted to bring it up when you mentioned you like Shazam and ask you if you've read that run of Miracle Man.
No, I have not, but now I'm like looking up Squirrel Girl.
Squirrel Girl's amazing. The Ryan North, who does Dinosaur Comics, writes that and just hits a perfect tone. Like, technically she's in the DC universe with all the other DC characters, but it's a very much more lighthearted, like, jokey like, you'll have people show up and be a lot more silly in Squirrel Girl than they probably would be in other places, but it works with her character, and those books are just a joy. And she ends up with like her own sort of weird Avengers, not like the Great Lakes Avengers, but she has Koi Boy and Chipmunk Hunk and like Nancy the accounting professional who help her out. That she doesn't have any power, she's just an accounting student.
I imagine any of these hero agencies would really take some good accounting. The only comics I've been into for a while, and I'm a couple issues behind. I read the first like 21 books of The Walking Dead, and I was really, really into Hellboy for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Hellboy is awesome.
I love, like, Mike Mignola is awesome. I love that art style, too.
Yes.
Like, just anytime, like, I've seen posters and things where he's done it, like, he did just a perfect Pan's Labyrinth poster.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just love seeing his artwork in almost anything.
Wasn't he also the artist on The Amazing Screw-On Head?
Yeah, he definitely was.
I remember seeing like a weird animated version of that at Walmart, and that I never did watch it, but for some reason, like that image of that character, and then reading up the synopsis of like, oh yeah, President Lincoln commissioned his building or whatever, and he was just like stuck in the closet in the White House for 100 years, and then comes out like all of that stuff. Just like I have to find out about this, and I never did.
Yeah,
read
we
it.
might need to review those cartoons sometime. For the Screw-On Head, I remember seeing a trailer for it, and I really wanted to check it out, but I never got to it.
It's a one-shot comic written and drawn by Mike Mignola.
Yeah.
Wonder how long it is. Anyway, you know how long this podcast is, Tony?
1 hour.
About this long.
But before we go, I want Waffles to tell us where he can, or where we can find him, what sort of stuff he does
He's
on
on the
Twitch,
call with us right now.
all of that good stuff.
It's not hard to find him.
Yeah, I'm right here, guys. It's very simple. No, yeah, you can pretty much find me anywhere. I got a Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. I am mostly active on Twitter at XXEvilWafflesXX. And I am very active on Twitch, which is XXEvilWaffles with a Z, XX.
And we'll have links to both of those on our website at humanechoes.com on the show notes for this episode, which is 204. If anybody is looking for that info.
And what sort of games are you usually streaming?
I stream all sorts of games. I love me some FPSs. Those are going to be the majority of the games. Every time Witcher 3 comes out with a DLC, I'm sorry, I got to play that pretty much until I beat it because I absolutely love that game. But for the most part now, it's pretty much GTA 5 mixed in with some Team Fortress 2, which is a fantastic game, which has been recently updated. A lot of Overwatch.
That's cool. I spent so much time.
I was going to
as
ask
the
about
flamer in that.
Overwatch.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of buzz about that. Haven't got to play it, but it seems like that's sort of setting the gaming world on fire right now.
Yes. And it's quick. Oh man, and they have so many plans for it right now. I don't even know where to begin. They got like ESL, man, major tournaments coming up, and
English is a second language?
yeah, Electronic Sports League.
But yeah, I've been on a lot of your streams. You're definitely very interactive with people. It's a lot of fun. You've got that funny voice modulation you can pull out every once in a while, like some great stuff with that. You've got like the bots that allow people to gamble while they're on the channel, depending on how long they've been doing stuff and donations and how many waffles they can accrue. It's a really fun channel, so I encourage you guys to check him out over on Twitch. Subscribe to his YouTube where he throws up it's like little highlights and things. Like I think the last one
you
he
were
put up
going to
was
stop after that.
he just throws up on YouTube. That's exactly what it is.
That's all it is.
That's what I do.
Hundreds of videos
like-
of me just throwing up.
Sure, there's like-
He hits so many weird octave notes. That perfect voice with like the going up. Like,
okay. Oh boy. Woo.
anyway, thank you all for listening today. If you go to humanechoes.com, the best way you can support the podcast is by becoming a member. If you hit that become a member link for $2, $5, $10, $20, you can get access to the bonus podcast and a bunch of other awesome things like postcards. You can get a shirt at some levels. You can get a lot of really cool bonus stuff. Another way is to click on that Amazon link on the right-hand side. Anything you buy on Amazon for the following 24 hours, we get a nice little cut of, usually about 4 to 6%. It adds up quickly, doesn't cost you anything else, and it puts money to fund the show so we can see more movies, find more guests, do more cool stuff for you guys. Our Viewers' Choice Month voting our nominations has just started, so be sure to get those in there. And thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Evil Waffles, for being here.
Not a problem.
And we will talk to you guys next week.
Bye.